It has come down to the final game. The Shambler takes on Hupsaiya on Sideshow. Let's see what happens. We've got the Shambler, of course, in the bottom right and Hupsaiya in the top left, and this is Sideshow. This is PvP. Protoss versus Protoss. And I love mirror matchups in Cosmonarchy. Cosmonarchy is not your average Starcraft version. Cosmonarchy is the thinking man's version of Starcraft. No, I jest, I joke. There's lots of brawly things you can do in this game, real manly strategies you can do instead of trying to be that thinking man stuff. You can just drop 4 gate and just spam Legionnaires. In fact, maybe we'll see that exact play here. But if you're new to Cosmonarchy and this is the first video you clicked on because you were blessed by the algorithm, let me just tell you, you were about to witness 2 fairly high-level Protoss players duke it out against each other, and I think this game is probably going to be about 30 minutes long. We've got gateways coming for both of our players, so dead open mirror right now. That might sound silly to say because of course they go gateway first, they're Protoss. Well, they don't have to. In Cosmonarchy, Protoss don't have any tech requirements, and the most common openers are still gateway openers, but you can go for a lattice, which is using the robotics facility graphic, and basically affords you robotics units, right? So if you go lattice opener, you've got more fragile units individually, but they have a little bit more utility or perhaps a little bit more power in unexpected ways. There's the only mineral-only air unit in the whole game comes from the lattice. It's the Vassal, and so that's quite interesting. We have the Shambler scouting his 2-gate opponent. His enemy forming a little bit of a pseudo-wall at the ramp. You can tight wall this, but I guess we're not going to see that in this particular map. And indeed, Legionnaires for the Shambler. His 2nd gate has been up a little bit earlier. It's been put down a little bit earlier, I should say, than his opponents. But yes, it's Legionnaires on both sides. So they're mirroring each other for now. As far as I can tell, the Legionnaire opener has been adjusted and countered. The Legionnaire is this guy over here. As you can see, Shambler is not microing him, so he's doing the classic Brood War thing, and now he'll figure it out. So the way that the Legionnaire works is it tags a unit, and that unit has that little visual overlay effect on it, right? And every time a Legionnaire, an allied Legionnaire, on an attack move within 3 range of the victim, basically gets acquired to that target, if the target that they're trying to attack is within 3 range and has that debuff, then they will just teleport to it directly. So you can imagine that makes it quite hard to retreat from them, and they also make great worker scout destroyers. You'll also notice that the workers, I mean, they look a little bit different because we have a new model for the scribe, but they also, I would say, when you're looking at the way that they operate, they move differently. They don't have acceleration anymore. Instead, they have more standard movement, like the infantry in Starcraft 1, right? If you think about like the Marine and the Firebat and stuff like that. The way that those units move is the same way that the workers move now, just a constant set rate. Legionnaire not able to get in the door, even though he looks like them. He's wearing different colors. Get out of here. We don't take people with your outfits. And yeah, the reason why that's significant is because obviously that meant that mining is a lot more stable and standard. We've also changed a lot about how the wandering works, so you don't get weird wandering trains and like stupid inefficiencies like that. I think you still want to mineral boost, which is kind of neat. I don't mind that that's still a thing. I don't have some sort of like opposition to mineral boosting as a concept. For those who are unaware, it's basically when you micromanage your workers in the early stages of the game, but you don't. Basically, like the efficiency, the longer the game goes on, is still pretty much there. So anyway, let's talk about the compositions, because Shambler's moving out. He's got a bunch of Zealots, which are much more durable and actually better at dealing damage and such than the Legionnaire. And he also is bringing with him some Ecclesiasts. So these Ecclesiasts are supportive units. They're mid-range. You can see here they have 4 range. You can actually, in Cosmonarchy, you can hold shift and actually see a preview of the range, which is pretty cool. Now, the way that the range is going to work here is that it's not just that they deal some damage, it's also that whenever they attack a unit, that unit radiates shields for the Ecclesiast's allies. So if it attacks this Legionnaire in the front, and the Zealots need shields, they'll get the shields healed by the Ecclesiast. I don't think it's going to be enough here because there's just so many more Legionnaires. So indeed, Shambler is going to have to try to tuck tail and run. These units are 50 gas and 50 minerals, so they're pretty expensive in terms of the tech resource, whereas the Zealots are 100 minerals, just like in StarCraft 1, so that is not that different. Interesting, he says. Yeah, I mean, He definitely had a reduced power compared to his opponent there in terms of just the number of units, right? Because for every zealot that the Shambler was able to make, Hupsaiya was able to make more legionnaires, since there's 75 minerals a pop instead of 100. So at some point the conversion rate gets better. And the gas was spent on Hierophants, which are these striders over here that we see. Maybe the last time we see this version of the graphic, because we have replaced it with a custom one. Ecclesiast's getting that cliff advantage, shooting down a little bit further. I think the Zealots are going to be more than enough to hold the Legionnaires. You can see some of them getting pretty much just cut down immediately, and the Hierophants are all that's left. Now, the Hierophant, we have a different passive for the Hierophant where it tags units, and it slows them. With the blue one is slowed, the red one is movement speed slowed, but also its attack rate is slowed. And the way that you get the red is by stacking up the passive by... Ooh, look at that. You stack up the passive 5 times. So the same unit has to have the 5 stacks. And then it turns from Cowardice to Malice. Cowardice is the movement speed slow. Malice is, of course, the attack rate slow. And then that little sound effect you heard there was actually a unit with Malice dying. We'll see it again here. And we don't have an overlay on this version of the game, but in the new version of the game, there is a visual for that. It increases the attack rate of the allies to say that, like, Shambler's Hierophant killed that guy or aided in the death of that guy. If a unit with Malice dies, any allies to the attacker are going to have increased attack rate for a short amount of time. So now we see Dracodons. This is more like the model that this is going to turn into. It's obviously very different so that you can tell they're different units. But the Dracodon is the replacement for the Dragoon. You can see it turns. It doesn't have this weird thing where it's not ever facing a different angle. And it's pretty cool, you know. It's a heavy hitter, a chunky, you know, like single target hit. They don't like Legionnaires because Legionnaires can actually dodge projectiles with their teleport. It's a little bit inconsistent. Well, it's not inconsistent. It's exactly consistent, but it feels effectively random when it happens sometimes because you might be like falling back and then your enemy is just on attack move and they teleport. So in practice, you can use it skillfully, but it's a little bit easier to do with, say, the Kabbalist, which is the Dark Templar replacement. The Kabbalist actually has a teleport based on if it's cloaked or not, and it decloaks when it attacks. So you can fall back after, you know, picking off a unit, and then you can teleport into battle immediately. That's kind of neat. You know, it's some people have drawn a comparison to, I think it's called Shadow Stride or something like that, for the Dark Templar Blink in Starcraft 2. It's an upgrade you can get, I'm pretty sure, off the Dark Shrine. And it's definitely a separate upgrade. Some of my brain has like campaign logic in it from Starcraft 2, and some of it has competitive. But anyway, the upgrade gives you Blink, basically. It's DT Blink is like the shorthand for it. And the problem with that is that I mean, it gives you the mobility, but I feel like the fact that it's an active behavior makes it a little bit less interesting to me. But hey, we'll talk about design in a separate point, maybe in my solo design podcast, because right now there's a fight going on, and Hupsaiya is being boxed into his main. There's so many Ecclesiasts here that now we're starting to see that really heavy shield turn go on into effect, because these Zealots are just not dying despite the superior amount of visuals. However, I'm still liking what I'm seeing here for Hupsaiya, because he has tuned through that front line at great cost. The Dracodon's helping out massively with that, because they kind of burst through the Zealots. The Zealots only have 40 shields, and despite having 2 armor, well, 3 armor while their shields are up, the Dracodon deals 15 damage. So it doesn't really give a damn. It doesn't have any armor pen, but it's still dealing 12 or 13 damage to the Zealot, and that means that it only needs to attack, say, 4 times before the Zealot has no more shields. And then the Ecclesiast healing is not as impactful, right? Because you're always losing some damage. So hemorrhaging that HP over and over again, bursting through the healing, is a pretty big deal. Now, while this is going on, we finally see a structure that isn't a gateway on both sides. And for the Shambler, that's actually going to be the Rogue Gallery. We'll talk about that in a moment, because right now we got to talk about the Ardent Authority for Hupsaiya. That structure is your heavier duty robotics production. You see here he's making a Reaver icon. That's the Acantor. Works very differently than the Reaver. The Reaver obviously has the Scarab, which has, let's say, it's notorious for not exactly behaving intelligently. And the Acantor removes the pathfinding aspect of the projectile, and instead just turns it into a sort of like a blind fire projectile that when you attack it, it doesn't track its target. It just goes there. It's like a very slow-moving dodgeball, and if you dodge it, great. But good luck actually doing that in the middle of battle, especially if there's more than one Acantor. It deals 80 damage. Obviously no armor pen or anything. At that point, you don't really need it, kind of ignores the armor system. And so with the way that the Acantor functions, it's something that's very powerful, but you can overwhelm it. And you can see it's still just as slow as ever. So we get a little bit of a demonstration of its projectile here, and just flies to the intended target and then explodes. It will be pretty good at dealing with the front line here. A couple of shots and it'll be, you know, off to the races, so to speak. Now, Shambler's opted for the Barghest, interestingly enough. This unit, when it decloaks, increases the attack rate of its allies. But right now, yeah, it wasn't actually attacking, it was on a follow command. So by decloaking, it increases armor penetration, not attack rate, my mistake. And the armor penetration means that he'll claw through things like the Zealots a little bit easier, especially with things like Legionnaires, which don't have any armor pen natively, and the same is true for the Ecclesiast. So a couple of his units are going to get caught by the Hierophant. You're seeing how powerful that unit can be, although it's not been minded exactly. Hupsaiya busy macroing back at home. But you know, this is Brood War, dude. Brood War at its core, Brood War's engine. You still got to deal with that. Now, thankfully for Hupsaiya, he does get a little bit of extra frags because the Shambler neglected to monitor his position here. He's going to see if he can reinforce it with the Dracodons coming out of the gateways. And while he's doing that, he's actually teching up to the endgame tech for the Disciple branch, as we're calling it, which is sort of like the ultimate gateway type stuff. And includes within it a very powerful artillery unit called the Optecton. And you can ask our Terran players about the Optecton. They're not a fan of it, but this is, of course, coming out from the Ancestral Archives. Very expensive structure, made even more expensive in the next version of the game. Vagrants are wandering on through. They're a unit with a double life, which you saw demonstrated very briefly there. Faulty rally for the Shambler, claiming the double life of one of his soldiers a little bit earlier. I don't know what his answer is going to be to the Acantors, because there's now two of them. But I guess if the front line gets chewed up on the right-hand side here, there won't be that much to obscure from the Optecton attack, which should be coming in any moment now. It's just idling at the ramp right now. So Shambler dropping the ball a little bit there because he's hemorrhaging a lot of his units, and you know he's going to be behind the 8-ball in terms of expansions. At least I would suppose so, based on the fact that there's a Nexus at 9 o'clock for Hupsaiya. And yes, the Optecton cracks a couple of shots off from the safety of the cliff. It, by default, has 11 range. That turns into 13 on a cliff. And yeah, we don't have any harvesting going on at 9 o'clock, but still pretty good stuff initially. A second Ancestral. Acantors, ooh, getting some splash damage hits onto that Optecton. They do have to watch out for the... Oh, man, that's a meaty hit. But I think it got obscured mostly by other things. Yeah, you lose one Acantor, but the Optectons are going to be brought down by the Dracodons and the Hierophants. Now, there is another one out already, but I actually like this composition in theory from Hupsaiya. He's going to get overwhelmed here and end up losing them. But I really like the idea that you use the Acantor, Dracodon, Architect sort of combo. Because if you think about what it does, it can engage the Optecton, but the Optecton's projectile gets intercepted by other units. So when the other units hit, right, basically the projectile has collision. The Acantor has the same thing, where as soon as it interacts or intersects with one unit, it detonates and deals the splash damage, which means that you can, you know, sort of body block it with, say, Zealots or something, and have it be less efficient. The Architects have homing missile attacks instead, so they are a lot better equipped at sort of counter-sniping, if you will, the Optecton. And this is obviously despite the fact that the Architect does have less range, but it's only less range by 1. So it's actually not that bad. A bunch of Architects going to continue to be the strategy du jour for Hupsaiya as he's adding another gateway. I think he's thinking about taking more tech. He does obviously have a slowly saturating third base. He hasn't taken the traditional third base here. Going for this one gives you access to the extra ridge. We didn't really talk about the ridge earlier, but if you haven't surmised it, it's basically the opportunity to get a little bit more Vespene, although it has gone unenjoyed by Hupsaiya. He's not bothered to saturate it in the main, which is a mistake. But he's starting to cap his geysers. You don't need to cap them initially in order to harvest them in Cosmonarchy. You can harvest them from the word go. Unlock some interesting strategies, of course. You know, you can imagine going Fulcrum first, a Factory first as Terran. That definitely gives you some options. The Analog is out here. It's a unit that hasn't really found its niche just yet by the way that people have played. It's pretty nimble, as you can see. And when you deal damage to the Analog, you receive their projectile back, as long as they have energy at the time of them taking damage. Architect is wandering into the wrong neighborhood, and so too are these Dracodons. So this is a little bit awkward because there is no front line available to tank for Hupsaiya. So good engagement initially for Shambler, but there's way more forces here for Hupsaiya, and his two Optectons aren't necessarily going to be able to stand up against everything here. Shambler recognizes that. He's going to let the Gateway and Rogue Gallery units fall by the wayside. And yeah, the Optectons are indeed withdrawing very slowly. I don't know that Hupsaiya is going to be able to catch them, but you know what? It's an option. Third base now set up for the Shambler. He's busy putting down static defense by the ramp. Buildings do get the range advantage as well. He's going to start to think about doing that over here to the north as well. But the 3 o'clock is not up online, so Hupsaiya will know that he's at worst even with his opponent. Now there's 3 Optectons here. Now he doesn't want to attack that analog, as you can see, he gets the shot hit back to him. But the analog is starting to get penetrated, right? So maybe a bunch of those would be useful. Not 100% sure. The Legionnaire is actually surrounding and isolating one of the 4 Optectons. There's actually a 4th one already out, though, thanks to the Ancestral Archives, the 2nd one there. Okay, the next one dies, but there's not really that much more of a front line to riposte these attacks. And once you get up here with the cliff advantage, oh my god, I can't believe an Optecton got stuck back there. Yeah, once you get back to the cliff advantage, you are in a bit of a tricky position here to attack forward. Now, you can tell Hupsaiya wants to split his forces like he's doing and wait for that melee round again and maybe go back in for another hit. Especially with Shambler taking a little bit of an interest, he's actually going to be encouraging his opponent forward, and I'm not so sure that Hupsaiya wanted to do that. Patriarch is out as well, so this unit has seen... Let's just say this is the strongest this unit has ever been. It did end up getting reduced a little bit in the next patch, but it's a pretty powerful unit, deals some splash damage, and notably it debuffs units, and when those units then take damage, they provide shields to the allies of the Patriarch. So if the Patriarch attacks, say, this Architect, and then a Drakiden attacks that Architect, the Drakiden will be healed for shields. So it has to be, of course, an ally of the Patriarch. You can see here this force is starting to dish out some damage. We actually got mass analog. Interesting strategy. Well, I say mass. There's 3 of them. He's trying to put them in the front line so that they actually absorb the Tecton projectiles. And you can see it is kind of working out. He's carved his way through a little bit. Now we've got a Clarion. Okay, so this becomes a little bit different because at this stage, the Clarion sort of projects this phase link behavior, and the phase link behavior shares shield damage across all linked combatants, which means that every time you attack, say, the Drakiden or the Legionnaire or whatever, it's going to act as if it was attacking the analog, and you're going to get your strike back at you. But it does scale with how much damage the analog actually takes. It's half the damage that the analog takes, so if you're only dealing 2 damage, you're only going to get 1 back. But it still could be pretty significant, right? In fact, just visually, it's intimidating. So the analog will end up dying. Now, the Clarions weren't there to help with that. So that's a little unfortunate, but you can see the thought process here from Hupsaiya. Thinking about using the analog, what can I do to make it so that they stay alive a little bit longer? I can reduce the amount of shield damage they take. It kind of reduces the amount of damage that they'll be giving back using their passive, but it might still be worth exploration. Even now, we'll have to wait and see. A couple of the Protoss arsenal, a couple of units in the Protoss arsenal do feel like maybe the role that they're supposed to satisfy might not be necessary, or something to that effect, where they feel surplus to requirements from a conceptual standpoint, perhaps. So that's something that we'll, of course, endeavor to correct over time. You look at the other races, and I feel like they have less units than the Protoss does that fit that bill. But also, there's not really been that much experimentation with Protoss compared to the other races, which is kind of interesting to think about. Like, I think maybe Protoss, their baseline is so solid that people haven't necessarily felt the need to experiment. There's a Zealot fight, but Hupsaiya's man was sabotaged and weakened. Bit of a small hit squad over here. Going to get caught. Now, the Patriarch here turns this fight really, really massively in favor of the Shambler. He's even got a Charlatan out as well. We'll talk about that in a moment. Clarion getting shelled quite a bit by the Optecton split damage there. When the Clarion loses its shields, it can no longer provide its passive, so that's an important note. But he's enchanting a lot of his units. And yeah, it looks like here, Shambler not too interested in progressing down that road. He's going to go down through the lower. And there is a nice little pylon nestled in between all this unbuildable stuff that lets Hupsaiya scout for this position. Got a lot of workers set up over here. He's going to add the engram, which is a high-tier tower. This pylon revealing the position. There's a lot of wardens already here to slow things down. With no supply limit, you can also just station a lot of actual military over there into different locations. Random Zealot revealed. Not sure what that was all about. Okay, the Wardens do focus down the Archon, which is kind of big. because the Archon obviously would be the most durable unit there. Now all the Optectons are kind of isolated, and there are no forces to protect them. So if this stack goes down, I don't like the situation whatsoever here for Shambler. He almost ends up picking the Clarion. In fact, he will end up picking the Clarion, but at this point, most of his Optectons are dead, and the other ones are very grievously wounded. The Zealots crashing upon the rest of the Shambler's forces, and the workers evaporate, but they also evacuate, so there's plenty of them still alive. Now, has the Shambler spent a little bit too much time in enemy territory? He's going to charge on forward, and he's going to focus down the Demiurge. We didn't even really get to talk too much about the Demiurge, but it does end up going down. However, it will be at a pretty grievous cost here, with another one already freshly here. Now, there are a couple of Zealots over here, but you know what? There's Wardens in this situation, so that's just kind of funny. Draconins will clean them up. More units moving around. We have 6 o'clock operational, but Shambler is at a base disadvantage. And in this set of games that we've seen played, where Shambler played as Terran twice, and then as Zerg once, and then now here as Protoss for one time before we conclude the set. Yeah, all right. So far, I mean, things are okay for him, but he has generally been behind in base count. Using his unit knowledge and his maybe some tactics or whatever as a way to get ahead. And right now, that unit knowledge is apparently telling him to mass Optectons some more. But Hupsaiya with the Demiurge, basically what the Demiurge works on is it debuffs units, and those units will eventually be mind-controlled. That is not the case in the modern version of the game, but the Demiurge is... we're talking about the Demiurge as it was played in this game, right? So if units get too close, they'll get debuffed, and if the debuff stacks up too much, it will obviously be pretty good at stealing the units. Now, you can see the Optecton is not close enough here, and that Demiurge is going to get absolutely bodied by the many Optectons. But there's also a pretty fearsome stack of Architects here. The problem is, there's not really that much here to prevent the Architects from getting bopped on the way out. You can see even with so many Optectons, though, they can't exactly one-shot the Architects. Oh, no. The bumbling. The brood warpathing. All right, looks like this will end up being cleaned up. He keeps 4 Architects on the high ground. That makes it not exactly ideal for the Shambler. Both players having a lot of minerals in the bank. Not so much for Vespene. Hupsaiya can obviously saturate his... I guess you'd call that his 5th base. It's kind of funny. I think he took the bottom left before he took his what is normally seen as the 3rd in this engagement. Random Zealot wandering over. The Vagrant answering in kind, just saying hi. Don't fuck with me. I know people in high places in this case. Oh man. So what else do we have? We've got a bunch of empty spots. The dust is settling right now. We've got more gateways being added. I guess they're mostly just doubling down on the same tech, but we do have an Argosy coming up. A Crucible enchants the production rate of all of the Protoss structures in the area, all of the allied structures in the area. So these will all make units 25% faster. It's kind of hard to see the overlay on this tile set, which is a known issue, so to speak. So... unfortunately for Hupsaiya, though, he's finding it difficult to deal with the many Optectons, despite his Architect count. He's going to go for the Air Force, and that's what the Argosy is for. But I'm not so sure that he's going to be able to actually deal with that. Now, this is really good, sending a sort of gateway stabby man army towards that 6 o'clock position. He's got the Legionnaires out, and he is going to go ahead and see what he can do to deal with these workers. And to, honestly, I wouldn't hate the idea of just falling back and dealing with that. You've already confirmed for Shambler that he needs to be worried about the northern flank, so that's where he's keeping all of his Optectons. But at this point, it's mostly just some economic damage. Both of our players having over 100 workers at this stage means that this doesn't really matter that much. And the Scribes will even fight on back. You can see the Vagrant shade there for a brief period of time. It's attacking faster, moving faster, but takes damage over time. So it says a time to life. A couple Zealots here to clean things up, and the Legionnaires will just leave. You know, even though it's 3 Legionnaires, it's not that much. Getting these units to evacuate, and then, like, you know, falling away or whatever, and forcing your opponent to have to account for them later is still pretty big. Now, unfortunately, I don't think either player has made an embassy. Am I wrong on that? So nobody has any witnesses. That's the new name for the Observer. So Hupsaiya has no idea that Shambler is now amassed a massive Optecton force, and is charging forward with, what is this, 12 Optectons? Yeah. So I don't know if Hupsaiya can hold versus this. This could be the deciding factor of the game with this many Optectons, but some of them were off to the side. The front line for both sides completely decimated. There's not so many on the Architect side here, so that's definitely going to be a little bit too much here. And yeah, the Worker's obviously just going to get completely shellacked and melted. And what can Hupsaiya do? He's building Solarians, not a bad shout, but there's so many of them here that in this version they still had their anti-air weapon that they kind of end up being the be-all end-all here. I predict that the Optecton is going to cause a little bit of salt, because it does feel quite bad to be like, okay, I'm going to build my Air Force and then, you know, try to engage at the same time, but then their anti-air attack will probably just kill all the stewards if I had to guess. I mean, especially if you only attack with one Solarian. You're not giving them too many targets, right? Yeah, they just end up doing that. Shambler's like, XD. And so that is, yeah, that's a little bit much. Well, hey, there you go. I think that's pretty much the game. I don't know if... Well, he's got 3 of them. I didn't realize he was making so many. There's a chance for him to be able to stab out. And remember, if Shambler loses this, what does he have back at home? I mean, he's been spending his money, but he's not actually got a huge force. He's wandering in with some more. Here's the move. I still think that there's too many of them for 3 Solarians, but it slowly seems to be chipping away. The focus fire needs to come out there. And he's not really focusing the low HP ones. You see the stewards returning back home to replenish their shields, so that'll be a moment. Another one pops out, so not a bad shout there. But one of the Argosies is going down. Yeah, this does feel like it's probably the end of the game. Let's see what Hupsaiya can do from this position, establishing more bases. If this had come out before the Optectons turned into a death stack, that would have been an option. And I also don't know... I'm trying to think about if there was another option with this version of the unit. Because again, the air is supposed to be a good counter to it, but because we had an anti-air weapon at this stage of the game, which has since been removed, the unit can still do stuff versus air units, right? So that's a pretty big deal. Yeah, at this point, I think we're probably talking about the end of the game here. I mean, let's see. He's got 6 Solarians, trying to launch the stewards, and maybe he's actually doing some stuff now. But he has lost a lot of tech. In fact, it looks like he might end up losing the last Argosy here. Yep. So he's going to be limited to these precious resources. So he has overwhelmed them after all. Stewards are just a weird choice for that because stewards, well, Solarians, right, the carrier, they rely on this other unit to do things. And that is pretty difficult to make work versus the Optecton specifically. Like, the Optecton's air weapon is designed to deal with small attacks, small air harassment. It doesn't really do too well versus capital ships. Like, it wouldn't do anything to the actual Solarians because they're too powerful, they're too tanky. So if these Argosies had been making, say, Magisters or even Empyreans, probably even Epigraphs, I feel like he would have been in an okay spot. But okay, I was kind of down on him thinking that, yeah, that's the game. However, looking around at what we've got, I mean, he can reestablish this base and his main for the depleted resources, but the gas never runs out. He still has the... this top right base was never actually harvesting, so it's not really the end of the world that goes down. He's still going strong at 9, which is starting to get depleted, and the bottom left is giving him plenty of Vespene. So it does feel like, you know, he just pumps out a bunch of Zealots, and he could go Zealot Solarian, and what can you really do with... like, Archons aren't really going to cut it. You've lost all of your Optectons. I guess you've remade more, but the Solarians can and will deal a lot of damage here. But again, you know, Solarians are best at single target, you know, fights, basically, like picking off individual targets, which is why eventually, when they hit a certain amount of mass, they were able to deal with the Optecton count. However, yeah, I guess they're okay at dealing with the scribes. I don't know, I would have just killed the Nexus by now. But you know what? Dealing some of the econ damage, it's not the end, not terrible. He's reestablished some stuff over here. This is a very indefensible base, but let's see. The Zealots are going to charge forward. Optecton started to attack a gateway by mistake. I assume that was a mistake. It actually might not be a terrible idea to kill that so that you can get your own units out faster. But that's assuming you're worried about being pressured in that respect. Now, the Zealots over here are going to have to deal with the engrams that are warping in. I feel like one of these is going to go down before it finishes. And it gets one shot off, I guess, but it will end up going down. Now, back over here, Optecton's wandering forward. That's a mistake from the Shambler. He really needs to ball up here versus the Solarians. And also, Hupsaiya can't be too focused on trying to attack in. Oh, no. Oh, my God. Oh, no. He right-clicked way too far, dude. I can't believe it. That was a huge blunder. That could have... He could have... yeah, okay. Well, no GG necessary. Hupsaiya wanders forward with his Solarians and looks up to 12 o'clock to resaturate or do something after clearing the Zealot attack. Man, he was still very much in that game, but at the end of the day, it's a tie set. And you know what, boys? If nothing else, watching that match definitely made me feel like, yeah, it's a good thing that the Optecton got reworked. I hope you guys think so too, and I hope to bring you some games with the Optecton rework pretty soon. But besides all that, let's just say that that mirror matchup was very different than what you'd see in StarCraft 1, and also in StarCraft 2. So if anything in there piqued your interest, hop on in. We got a Discord server with over 500 frauds. We got a coffee page where you can send us money. And of course, we've got an installer that gets the game set up for you so you can start playing yourself. And pretty soon, I think we might even have better, what would you say, better networking performance than Remastered, if you can believe that. So check that out when it comes out pretty soon. Fingers crossed. GG's.